Aurelia Campello fixed her dark curls in front of the mirror in her car. The August sun was scorching, turning the small Brazilian town into a red-hot oven. She turned off the air conditioning and, taking her purse, stepped out of the car. The heels of her expensive shoes clinked on the cobblestone street leading to her favorite cafe, Esperanza. Consuela was already waiting for her at a table at the back of the room. The friends had met here every Wednesday for the past 5 years. It was their little tradition, a cup of freshly brewed coffee and long conversations about everything in the world. "Sorry I'm late." Aurelia sat down across from her friend. "Had a difficult client at the salon this morning." "That's okay. I just got here." Consuela looked at her friend carefully. "You look tired. Is something wrong?" Aurelia slowly stirred the sugar in her cup, watching the white crystals dissolve. "Ernesto, he's become different. I can't explain it, but something has changed." She took a sip of the hot drink. "He used to always call during the day, asking how I was, inquiring about things at the salon. Now he doesn't even notice when I get home." Consuela frowned. "Maybe he's having problems at work? Have you tried talking to him?" "I've tried. He waves it off, says everything's fine, he's just tired. But I have a feeling it's not about tiredness." The waitress brought their favorite dessert, passion fruit pudding. She and Ernesto used to come here together often. He always ordered 2 puddings because he knew she wouldn't be able to finish hers and would definitely ask to taste his portion. "You know, last weekend we were at his parents' house," Aurelia continued, "and for the first time ever, I felt like a stranger. Ernesto hardly spoke to me, checking his phone all the time, and when his mother asked about our vacation plans, he didn't even look in my direction." Consuela shook her head. "Honey, men can be inconsiderate sometimes. Maybe you should have a romantic evening. Remind him of how you met." Aurelia smiled sadly, remembering that evening 7 years ago. She had just opened her beauty parlor then, investing all the money her father had given her. Ernesto had stopped by to schedule a haircut for his mom and sister. He was so charming, so genuinely interested in her business. "For the last 2 months he's been late to work almost every day. Says it's an important project, but—" Aurelia fell silent, rubbing her napkin. "But," Consuela pitched forward, "yesterday I found a restaurant receipt in his shirt pocket. Dinner for 2, Consuela. He said he was working late that night." Her friend took her hand. "Aurelia, don't jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a business meeting?" "At 10 o'clock at night, at the most romantic restaurant in town." Aurelia shook her head. "I don't know what to think." They sat in the cafe for another hour. Consuela talked about her boutique, about the new collection due next week, about the gossip of their mutual acquaintances. But Aurelia listened half-heartedly, immersed in her own thoughts. Back at the salon, she plunged into the familiar bustle. Her Belladonna was the most popular beauty salon in town. 12 masters worked in 2 shifts to satisfy all the clients. Aurelia was proud of the fact that she had created this business from scratch. Of course, her father helped with money, but everything else, the concept, design, staffing, was her merit. "Signora Campello," the receptionist Maria approached her. "The customer in the 3rd chair is asking for you personally. She says only you can give her the perfect coloring." Aurelia nodded and headed to her workstation. Work always helped her take her mind off her problems. As she worked on her client's hair, there was no room in her head for anxious thoughts. She was just finishing a complicated coloring job when her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Ernesto. "I'll be late again tonight. Don't wait with dinner." Aurelia glanced at her watch 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually at this time he was just planning his evening. Before, he always asked what to make for dinner, suggested stopping by the supermarket. Until the end of the working day, she tried not to think about her husband, completely immersed in her work. Her last client was an elderly Senora Benitez, who had been coming to see her every week for 3 years now. "Darling," she said, looking at her new hairdo, "you look a little sad today. Trouble?" "No, not at all," Aurelia smiled, strained. "Just tired a little." "You know," Senora Benitez adjusted her glasses, "I've lived a long life and I can say for sure, every problem has a solution. The main thing is not to be afraid to face it." Aurelia remained silent, putting her tools away, to face the truth. But what was that truth? Could Ernesto really have? At 9 o'clock she closed the parlor. The streets of the city were already deserted, only the rare passers-by hurrying about their business. Aurelia got into the car and for a few minutes just sat there, clutching the steering wheel. She didn't want to go home. An empty apartment and the silence that had become unbearable lately were waiting for her there. As she parked outside her house, she noticed that the lights in their apartment were off. So Ernesto hadn't come back yet, or had he decided not to turn on the lights? Aurelia took the elevator to the 5th floor. The empty apartment smelled like the perfume she'd bought a month ago. Ernesto had said then that he didn't like the scent, and before, they always chose perfume together. She turned on the kitchen light and opened the refrigerator. She didn't feel like eating. There was a bottle of wine on the top shelf, which they were going to open over the weekend. Now it was unclear if they would even spend the weekend together at all. Aurelia was sitting in the dark living room when she heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. The clock read 11 p.m. She didn't turn on the lights. Only the street lamps cast dim shadows on the walls. Ernesto walked in, froze in the doorway for a second, noticing her silhouette. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" he asked, flicking the light switch. The bright light slashed at her eyes. Aurelia squinted her eyes, scrutinizing her husband. His shirt was a little wrinkled, his tie pushed to the side. He smelled of cologne, stronger than usual, as if he'd added it on purpose before coming home. "Pensive," she replied. "How was your day?" "Normal. Lots of work." He walked to the kitchen without even looking at her. Opening the refrigerator, he pulled out a bottle of water. "Did you have dinner?" "No, didn't feel like it." Ernesto shrugged. He used to always kiss her when he came home, even if he was tired or upset. Now it was as if an invisible wall had grown between them. Aurelia watched him walk to the bedroom, his broad shoulders beneath his white shirt. 6 years ago she had fallen in love with his smile, the way he looked at her, as if she were the only woman in the world. The sound of water came from the bedroom. Aurelia mechanically got up and went to the kitchen. She opened a cabinet, took out a frying pan. There were eggs and tomatoes in the refrigerator so she could make an omelet. She didn't feel like cooking, but she needed something to keep her hands busy. She remembered their first apartment, small, in an old building overlooking the neighbor's wall. They had been so happy there. Ernesto made her breakfast on weekends. They could lie in bed for hours, making plans for the future. Then things at the salon went uphill. Her father helped her buy this apartment in an upscale neighborhood. It seemed like all their dreams were coming true. The omelet turned out lush and flavorful. Aurelia put the plate on the table and sat down to wait for her husband. 15 minutes later, he came out of the bedroom in homemade pants and a t-shirt, with his hair damp after a shower. "Did you make dinner?" There was a slip of surprise in his voice. "Yes, sit down." He sat down across from me, picked up his fork. They ate in silence. The silence pressed on their ears, interrupted only by the clinking of utensils against plates. They'd never eaten in silence before. There was always something to talk about, something to share. "Delicious," Ernesto said, finishing. "Thank you." "Is the project really that complicated?" Aurelia asked, gathering the dishes. "You're coming back so late." "Yes, the client is demanding," he rubbed his temples. "You have to double-check everything 10 times. Is there anything I can do to help?" "What can you do?" Irritation sounded in his voice. These are financial reports, not hairstyles. Aurelia froze at the sink. Ernesto had never spoken that way about her work before. On the contrary, he was proud of her success, bragging to his friends that his wife was a successful businesswoman. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean to. I'm just tired." "Of course." She turned on the water to hide the tremor in her voice. "I understand." He got up from the table. "I'm going to go lie down. I have to get up early tomorrow." "Good night," she replied without turning around. Aurelia finished the dishes, wiped her hands. The nightlight was already on in the bedroom. That meant Ernesto was still awake. Maybe she should try to talk. She went to the door but stopped when she heard her husband's muffled voice. He was on the phone with someone. "I can't talk right now," he said quietly. "Tomorrow. Yes, I'll try." Aurelia backed away from the door. Her heart was beating somewhere in her throat. Who is he calling at this hour? Who can he talk to in front of her? She went back into the living room, sat down on the couch. There was a movie on the TV with no sound. She couldn't even remember when she'd turned it on. There was a glossy magazine on the coffee table. She'd bought it a week ago, but she'd never opened it. The cover showed a happy couple embracing against the ocean. The lights went out in the bedroom. Aurelia continued to sit in the living room, mindlessly flipping through the pages of the magazine. Pictures floated before her eyes. Beautiful interiors, fashionable outfits, recipes for exotic dishes. The happy people in the pictures seemed like characters from another life. The phone on the table vibrated. A message from Consuela. "How are you? Why don't we meet tomorrow after work?" Aurelia set the phone aside without answering. What could she tell her friend? That her husband comes home past midnight, that he smells like someone else's perfume, that she's afraid to look at his phone because she might find confirmation of her fears there. The clock in the living room struck midnight. Aurelia got up, turned off the television. The bedroom was dark and quiet. She carefully opened her closet, pulled out her nightgown. She used to sleep in his shirts. They smelled of him. It was cozy. Now she bought herself silk pajamas, which he had no interest in at all. Ernesto lay on his side of the bed, turned away from the wall. Aurelia lay down, trying not to make any noise. There was no more than a meter between them, but it felt like an abyss separating them. She closed her eyes, trying to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was reeling with fragments of today. The check from the restaurant in her shirt pocket, the late phone call, the irritation in his voice. A car drove by outside the window, headlights illuminating the room for a second. Shadows danced across the ceiling and disappeared. Aurelia turned on her side, looking at her husband's back. His breathing was even. He was already asleep. I wondered if he was dreaming. And if so, was she in his dreams? The morning was overcast. Aurelia awoke to the sound of the front door slamming. Ernesto had already left for work. There was a crumpled pillow on his side of the bed and an empty water glass on the bedside table. He used to always wake her up with a kiss, even if he left early. She reached for the phone 7:30 in the morning. He was usually just getting ready for work at this time. Why so early today? The screen glowed with an unread message from him. "Urgent meeting at 8. Didn't bother to wake you." Aurelia sat up in bed, running her hand over the cool sheets where her husband slept. The smell of his shower gel still lingered in the bathroom. She stood up, walked to the window. It was drizzling outside, the rare passers-by hurrying about their business, umbrellas covered. The kitchen was in perfect order. Not a cup of coffee, not a plate of breakfast. So he hadn't even eaten. Aurelia turned on the coffee maker, pulled a yogurt out of the refrigerator. She didn't feel like eating, but it was going to be a long day. The phone vibrated again, this time Consuela. "You never answered yesterday. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," Aurelia texted. "Just tired. Talk to you later?" She sipped her coffee slowly, looking out the window at the gray sky. The same thought kept running through her head. Something had to be done. Can't let their marriage fall apart like this, unnoticed, day after day. The salon was unusually quiet. The first client had canceled her appointment because of the rain. Aurelia sat in her office, looking over the schedule for the week. Her gaze fell on the calendar. Their wedding anniversary was in a month. 6 years. She remembered every minute of that day. Her white dress, Ernesto's happy smile, the rice flying in the air, the first dance. "Senora Campello?" Maria peeped in the door. "Senora Oliveira is here. She's a little early." "Thank you, Maria. I'll be right out." Aurelia fixed her makeup, pulled her blouse up. No, she wasn't going to let her problems affect her work. Smiling at her reflection in the mirror, she stepped out into the parlor. The day stretched slowly. Between clients, Aurelia checked her phone every now and then. There was no call or message from Ernesto. He used to always text her at lunchtime asking how she was doing, telling her funny stories from work. At 3 in the afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. She opened the list of restaurants on her phone and stopped at Casa Verde, a small, cozy place they'd frequented during their first year of dating. Her finger hovered over the call button. Would he say he was busy again, or make up another meeting? Aurelia took a deep breath and pressed call. "Yes?" Ernesto's voice sounded distant, as if she'd distracted him from something important. "Hi, are you really busy?" "There is a little. Did something happen?" "No, just," she stammered. "I thought maybe we could have dinner together. At Casa Verde." A pause hung on the other end of the line. Aurelia closed her eyes, waiting for another rejection. "Okay," he agreed abruptly. "At 7? "Yes, 7." She smiled, feeling her heart beat faster. "I'll make reservations." "Deal. I gotta run." He disconnected without waiting for her response, but it didn't matter. The important thing was that he'd agreed. Maybe all was not yet lost. The remaining hours flew by unnoticed. Aurelia canceled the last appointment, apologizing to the client, and went home to change. She chose a dark blue dress that Ernesto had once called sexy, styled her hair, and put on his favorite sapphire earrings, a gift from her last birthday. She arrived at the restaurant at 15 to 7. The maitre d' escorted her to the table by the window, the same one where Ernesto had first told her he loved her. There were candles burning on the table, live music playing, and they couldn't take their eyes off each other. She ordered a bottle of red wine, the very same wine they had drunk that night. The hands of the clock showed exactly 7. Aurelia spread her napkin on her lap, pulled out her phone. No messages, no missed calls. 7:15. She took a sip of wine, trying to calm herself. Traffic, maybe? Or a delayed meeting. 7:30. The waiter approached for the third time to ask if she was ready to order. Aurelia shook her head. She would wait for her husband. At 7:45, the phone finally rang. "I'm sorry." Ernesto's voice sounded guilty. "I can't make it out. A client sent urgent edits. Everything needs to be done by morning." Aurelia remained silent, looking at the untouched plate of bread. "Can you hear me?" he asked. "Aurelia?" "Yes," she answered quietly. "I can hear you. We can reschedule for another day. I promise." "Of course," she interrupted. "I understand. Work." She hung up the phone, finished her wine in one gulp. A slow tune played in the room, happy couples laughing at neighboring tables. Aurelia took out her wallet and placed a bill on the table, covering the wine bill and a generous tip. Stepping outside, she stood under the restaurant's visor for a few minutes. The rain was still drizzling, turning the lights of the city into blurs. She should have brought an umbrella, but she hadn't thought of it this morning. Aurelia got into the car, but was in no hurry to start the engine. Consuela's words about fighting for her marriage resounded in her head. But how can you fight if your opponent is a void? If a wall of innuendo, excuses, and fake smiles has grown between you. The phone rang again. This time Ernesto texted, "I'm really sorry. Let's have dinner this weekend, shall we? Wherever you want." She didn't answer. She started the car and drove home, trying to focus on the road and not on the traitorous thoughts of where and with whom her husband was really now. At home, the first thing Aurelia did was to take off the earrings. The gift suddenly seemed heavy, out of place. She put them in the box where she kept Ernesto's jewelry. Each of them had its own story. A ring for her first anniversary, a bracelet for Christmas, a necklace for her birthday. Now all those gifts seemed like a mockery. In the bedroom, she saw her reflection in the mirror. A beautiful dress, perfect styling, meticulous makeup. All this for a man who didn't even show up, who couldn't find one night for his wife. After the failed dinner at the restaurant, Aurelia plunged headlong into work. She arrived at the salon before everyone else and was the last to leave, taking on extra clients, taking inventory of cosmetics, anything to keep her mind off the empty apartment and cold bed. That morning, she'd been going through job applications. One of the masters was going on maternity leave and needed a replacement. The stack of resumes on the desk was uninspiring. Most of the candidates were too young and inexperienced for her salon. "Signora Campello," Maria knocked on the office door. "There's a girl here about the vacancy. No appointment, but says she has a lot of experience." Aurelia sighed. "Okay, let her in." The girl turned out to be a tall blonde about 25 with bright makeup and wearing a skirt too short for an interview. She held out a printed resume. "My name is Sylvia Montero. I've worked in 3 salons, specializing in elaborate coloring and wedding hairstyles." Aurelia looked over the resume. The experience was indeed impressive, but something about the girl was alarming. Perhaps an overconfident tone or an overly revealing outfit. "Do you have a portfolio of work?" Sylvia pulled out her phone, started showing pictures. The work was really good. Intricate techniques, flawless execution. But Aurelia couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling. "I'll think about your candidacy and let you know the decision," she said, ending the meeting. After the girl had left, Maria looked into the office. "What do you think of the candidate?" "I don't know," Aurelia answered honestly. "Professionally, everything is excellent, but there is some inner resistance. You know," Maria lowered her voice. "While she was waiting, I heard her phone conversation. She was talking to someone about settling in with us because rich clients and their husbands come here." Aurelia wrinkled her nose. "Thanks for telling me. I won't take her." She went back to looking at other resumes, but her thoughts kept returning to Maria's words. Rich clients and their husbands. Did some women really come to work in beauty salons just to find a wealthy man? The phone vibrated. It was Consuela calling. "You've been missing," her friend began without greeting. "What happened after that dinner?" "Nothing." Aurelia leaned back in her chair. "That's the problem. He didn't show up. He cited work." "And you just let it go?" "What was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Demand an explanation?" There was a pause in the receiver. "Listen," Consuela finally said. "I'm your friend and I have to tell you something. I saw Ernesto yesterday." Aurelia's heart beat faster. "Where?" "At the Café Primavera. He wasn't alone." Aurelia clutched the phone. "With whom?" "With a young woman. They were sitting in the far corner rather close to each other. I didn't want to say, but—" "What did she look like?" Aurelia interrupted. "Brunette, slim, wearing a business suit. I couldn't make out a face." Aurelia closed her eyes. Business suit. So, most likely a co-worker. But then, why in the cafe and not in the office? And why hadn't he mentioned this meeting? "Thanks for telling me," she said quietly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. I need to think about it." After talking to Consuela, work was no longer working. Aurelia looked out the window. It was starting to rain outside again. August this year had been unusually rainy, as if nature was reflecting her mood. She pulled out her phone, opened the messages from her husband. The last one was from last night. He'd written that he'd be late, as usual. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. What could she have written? Where were you last night? Who did you meet at the cafe? Any question would give away her knowledge and lead to a scandal. There was another knock on the door. This time it was a client, Senora Morales, wife of a prominent lawyer. Aurelia, darling, the woman kissed her cheek. You look tired. Is there a problem? No, not at all. Aurelia smiled habitually as she escorted her client to a chair. Just a lot of work. While she styled her hair, Senora Morales recounted the latest city gossip. Aurelia listened, half listening, mechanically performing the familiar actions. Her thoughts were far away, in the Café Primavera, where her husband was sitting with a strange woman. And then it turned out he was having an affair with his secretary, came the voice of a client. Can you imagine? 20 years of marriage and such an embarrassment. Aurelia almost dropped her hairbrush. I'm sorry. What did you say? Talking about Claudia Vega's husband. You know her, don't you? They always seemed like such a perfect couple, and now a divorce and property division. Aurelia nodded, trying to quiet the trembling in her hands. Claudia Vega had been a client of hers a few years ago, an elegant woman, always impeccably dressed, perfectly styled and manicured, just like Aurelia herself. The day stretched on endlessly. After the last client left, Aurelia was alone in the salon. She sat in her office, staring at the screen of her phone. Ernesto hadn't called or written all day. Usually, he would at least ask if she would be home for dinner. It was almost 9 p.m. when she finally made up her mind. She dialed her husband's number. His phone was off. She opened the app to track the charges on their shared credit card. Yesterday's date, Café Primavera, the amount, for two. The time, 7 p.m., just as he'd said he was working late. Aurelia slowly scrolled through her spending history for the past month. Restaurants she couldn't remember, purchases at a women's clothing store. She definitely hadn't bought anything that day. The bracelet from the jewelry store, not her bracelet. She saved all the receipts on her phone, took screenshots. Her hands acted automatically while her brain refused to realize the obvious. Her perfect marriage, her loving husband, everything she'd believed in for the past 6 years was a lie. The office building where Ernesto worked stood a glassy hulk in the city's business district. Aurelia parked her car in the underground parking lot, checked her makeup in the rearview mirror. She had deliberately chosen a strict business suit. No one should suspect the true reason for her visit. An elderly security guard met her in the lobby. Good morning, Senora Campello. It's been a long time since we've seen you. Good morning, Joao, she smiled. She used to stop by her husband's house often for lunch. The guard knew her well. Ernesto is not here right now? No, Senora. He left to meet a client an hour ago. Exactly what she'd expected. Ernesto had mentioned at breakfast an important meeting outside the office. That's okay. I'll get the documents from his office. He's been warned. The guard nodded and let her through to the elevators. Her heart beat more frequently with each floor. At the 12th, where the finance department was located, Aurelia took a deep breath and stepped off the elevator. The familiar open space greeted her with the murmur of voices and the clatter of keyboards. Several employees said hello to her. She knew many from company parties. Her gaze glanced around the workstations looking for the brunette Consuela had mentioned, but she didn't see anyone like her. Carolina Pereira, the secretary in the finance department, sat at her desk, sorting through papers. She had worked here for 15 years and knew all the office secrets. Aurelia, Carolina brightened. What a surprise. Ernesto isn't here right now. I know, Aurelia crouched on the edge of her desk. Actually, I wanted to talk to you. Do you have a minute? Carolina looked at her carefully. then nodded. Sure, let's go to the break room. There's no one there right now. They walked to a small room with a coffee machine and a couch. Caroline closed the door and turned to Aurelia. I guess what you want to ask? Aurelia froze. Really? It's about Marianne, isn't it? Carolina sighed. I was going to call you, but I wasn't sure if I should get involved. Marianne? Aurelia tried to keep a calm expression on her face. She came to us 3 months ago, a junior financial analyst. Caroline lowered her voice, and immediately started hovering around Ernesto. 3 months. That's when her husband started staying late at work. Tell me everything, Aurelia asked quietly. Carolina poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Aurelia. At first it was innocent conversations at the coffee machine. Then she started coming into his office with work-related questions. More and more often. I saw her flirting with him, casual touches, laughing at his jokes. Aurelia mechanically stirred her coffee, unable to smell its aroma. And then the lunches together began, Caroline continued, ostensibly to discuss projects. But I'm the secretary, I see the schedule of meetings. Those lunches weren't officially recorded. What does she look like? Aurelia asked, even though she already knew the answer. 27 years old brunette, always impeccably dressed, from a well-to-do family, judging by the brand name clothes, very ambitious. That's exactly the kind of woman Consuela described. Does she know Ernesto is married? Carolina chuckled bitterly. Oh, she knows it perfectly well. She even asked me about you once, what you're like, what you do. I knew right away what the questions were about. Aurelia set the untouched cup on the table. Is she here now? No, she left with Ernesto to meet with a client, although it's usually the senior analyst who goes to these meetings, not the junior one. So they're together now, probably sitting in some restaurant, laughing, touching each other under the table. Aurelia, Caroline touched her arm. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, she stood up. Thanks for telling me. Wait. Caroline rummaged through her bag and pulled out her phone. I took some pictures at the last corporate party. Thought it might come in handy. She opened the gallery and showed Aurelia the pictures. They showed Ernesto and a young woman in a tight black dress standing at the bar, too close for co-workers. Mariana's hand rested on his shoulder. They were laughing about something. That was 2 weeks ago, Caroline said. The night Ernesto said he had an important presentation. Aurelia nodded silently. She'd waited for him until midnight that night, worried if something was wrong. Forward those pictures to me, please, she requested. Carolina quickly sent the pictures. Just, don't tell Ernesto it's from me. I need this job. Don't worry. Aurelia headed for the door but stopped. Look, what do the other employees think about this? Carolina wrinkled her nose. Everyone sees what's going on, but they keep quiet. Ernesto is the head of the department after all. Some are judgmental, of course, especially the older women. We remember how you used to come to him for lunch, how he used to brag about your successes. Aurelia left the break room, walked through the open space. She noticed the looks of the staff now, sympathetic, curious. They all knew. They'd all seen her husband flirting with a young co-worker, and they were silent. In the elevator, she allowed herself to lean against the wall. In her purse was her cell phone with the photos, irrefutable proof that her suspicions were not in vain. She pulled out the phone, took another look at the pictures. Marianne was beautiful, big eyes, chiseled figure, confident smile, just as Aurelia herself had been at 27. The guard, Joao, nodded to her on the way out. Goodbye, Signora Campello. She didn't answer, hurrying toward her car. She got behind the wheel but was in no hurry to start the engine. A new message from Ernesto appeared on her phone. The meeting is dragging on. I'll be late. Of course a meeting drags on, especially if you hold it not in the client's office but in some cozy restaurant or a hotel. Aurelia started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. Now she knew the name and face of the woman who was destroying her marriage, knew that all her suspicions were well-founded. What remained was to decide what to do with that knowledge. After her conversation with Caroline, Aurelia began to notice little things that she had previously overlooked. The phone that Ernesto now always carried with him, even to the bathroom. The new perfume from a month ago. Shirts she didn't remember buying. That morning she woke up earlier than usual. Ernesto was still asleep, and she quietly left the bedroom, grabbing his jacket, carelessly tossed on the chair yesterday. In the pocket she found receipts from a restaurant and some boutique. Aurelia carefully photographed them on her phone, taking care not to crumple the paper. Another pocket held a business card from the Palace Hotel, one of the most expensive in the city. A phone number was written on the back, clearly in a woman's handwriting. She took a picture of that too. Putting her jacket back on, Aurelia walked to the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. A few minutes later, footsteps were heard. Ernesto had gotten up. "You're early today," he said, entering the kitchen. "Lots of work at the salon." She handed him a cup of coffee. "How was your meeting yesterday?" "Fine." He took a sip. "The client agreed to our terms." "Is this the same client you met with last week?" Ernesto froze for a second. "Yes, the same one." Lie. Aurelia knew for a fact that they were different companies. She checked his calendar on his phone while he slept. And Marianne was present too? Now he visibly tensed. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. You said she was a good specialist." "Yeah, she's helps with the project." He set the cup down. "I should get ready." Aurelia watched him hurriedly leave the kitchen. He always used to take his breakfast leisurely, reading the news on his tablet, discussing the day's plans with her. She pulled out her phone, opened the app to track her bank transactions. Yesterday's spending, a business lunch at Maxime's restaurant, too expensive for a regular business meeting. Once again, it was the same women's clothing boutique. Consuela was waiting for her in the salon. Her friend had come ostensibly for a hairstyle, but Aurelia knew the real reason for her visit. "Well?" Consuela asked when they were alone in the office. Aurelia showed her the pictures from the corporate party. "Her name is Mariana, 27 years old, works in his department." Consuela shook her head. What a cliché, a boss and a young female employee. Yesterday they were together again, allegedly at a meeting with a client. "Are you sure?" Aurelia opened the expense app. "Look, Maxim's restaurant at 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The bill is for two. And this." She showed a picture of a hotel business card. "Oh my God!" Consuela covered her mouth with her hand. "What are you going to do?" "Observe for now. Gather evidence." "Why?" "I think there's enough evidence already." Aurelia shook her head. "No, I want to know everything, every detail of their relationship." "But why torture yourself?" "Because when I start acting out, he shouldn't have a chance to deny everything." After her friend had left, Aurelia plunged headlong into her work. But even while styling and coloring, her brain continued to analyze the situation. How long has this been going on? Where are they meeting? What is he saying to this girl? The same things he once said to her. At lunchtime, she drove past Ernesto's office. His car was parked in the parking lot, but there was a silver Honda parked next to it, the same one she'd seen in the pictures from the corporate party, in the background. Marianne's car. Aurelia parked a few spaces further away and waited. 15 minutes later, Ernesto and Mariana emerged from the building. They got into his car and drove off. She followed, keeping her distance. Her husband's car stopped outside a small restaurant in a quiet neighborhood. The perfect place for a secret meeting. No acquaintances, no random witnesses. Aurelia parked so she could see the windows of the restaurant. They sat at a table by the window. How ironic, just like their first date. Mariana was talking animatedly. Ernesto was laughing. His hand lay on the table next to hers, not yet touching, but ready to touch. She sat in the car for an hour, watching them. Mariana often fixed her hair, a flirtatious gesture that has an unmistakable effect on men. Ernesto leaned toward her, saying something in her ear. Once his hand slid over her shoulder, a casual touch that might have seemed innocent if not for the whole context. As they left the restaurant, Marianne corrected his tie, an intimate gesture to which only a wife is entitled. Ernesto didn't pull away, only smiled. They got into the car and drove off, but not towards the office. Aurelia did not follow them. She already knew where they were going. The business card of the Palace Hotel was burning her jacket pocket. Ernesto came home late that evening. He smelled like a different perfume, light, floral. He went straight into the shower, and Aurelia methodically checked his clothes. There was a lipstick residue on the collar of his shirt, barely noticeable, but she knew where to look. "Rough day?" she asked when he stepped out of the shower. "Very. This client is exhausting. Maybe we should hand the project over to someone else. Marianne seems to be doing a good job." He tensed. "Why do you keep asking about Marianne?" "Just wondering about your work, can't I?" Ernesto turned away, pretending to look for something in the closet. "You can, of course, but I have many employees, and for some reason you only ask about her." "Because you talk about her a lot yourself." "That's not true," he turned sharply. "I hardly ever talk about her." "Then I must have imagined it," Aurelia shrugged. "I'm sorry." He relaxed a little, but there was still wariness in his eyes. Did he suspect something, or just afraid she'd guess? At night, Aurelia lay awake for a long time, listening to his breathing. I wonder if he sleeps soundly. Does his conscience torment him? Or is this just a game to him, a pleasant diversion with a young mistress? She turned on her side, looking at his profile in the darkness. Here was this man she'd lived with for 6 years, who'd sworn to love her forever, embracing another woman tonight, kissing her, whispering tender words, making love to her in an expensive hotel. Ernesto's phone vibrated quietly on the nightstand. He wasn't awake, but Aurelia saw the screen light up with an incoming message. She gingerly reached out and picked up the phone. A message from M. "Good night. Tonight was wonderful." Aurelia put the phone back down. Now she had another piece of evidence, but that didn't make it any easier. Things didn't go according to plan that day. The salon's air conditioning system had broken down in the morning. 2 of the masters were sick, and the main cosmetic supplier had reported a delay in an important shipment. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Aurelia had a splitting headache and decided to drive home to pop a pill and get some rest. As she parked outside the house, she spotted a familiar silver Honda. Her heart beat faster. Marianne's car was parked right under their windows. Aurelia looked up. The lights were on in the windows of their apartment, even though Ernesto was supposed to be at work. She got out of the car slowly, feeling her knees shake. In the elevator, she pressed the button for her floor, trying to breathe steady. 5th floor. The doors opened silently. Aurelia pulled out her keys but froze in front of the door. Muffled voices and laughter came from the apartment. A woman's laughter. She quietly inserted the key into the lock, turning it with the utmost care. The front door opened without a creak. High-heeled shoes stood in the hallway. Definitely not hers. Expensive from a well-known brand. Next to them, Ernesto's shoes, tossed carelessly on the mat. Voices came from the bedroom. Their bedroom. Aurelia took off her shoes and tiptoed down the hallway. The door to the bedroom was ajar. "Are you sure she won't be back early?" Marianne's voice sounded playful. "She never comes home at this time," Ernesto replied. Aurelia froze at the door, her hand involuntarily clenched into a fist. Through the crack she could see them. Mariana was sitting on their bed, on her pillow. She was wearing only a silk blouse, unbuttoned almost to her waist. Ernesto stood beside her, his shirt already lying on the floor. "Come to me." Mariana held out her arms. Ernesto leaned toward her and they began to kiss. His hand slid under his mistress's blouse and she moaned softly. Aurelia backed away from the door. Her ears were noisy and red spots swam before her eyes. She moved slowly, silently back toward the exit. She put on her shoes, opened the front door, just as quietly as she'd come in. Only in the elevator did she allow herself to exhale. The car slowly descended and the picture before her eyes was a picture. Their bedroom, their bed, his hands on the other woman's body. She got into her car and drove out of the parking lot with no clear idea where she was going. Just away from here, away from this house where her husband was making love to another woman in their marital bed. 20 minutes later, she found herself parked outside her parents' house. The mansion where she grew up loomed behind the wrought iron gates. The security guard recognized her car and opened the gate without a bell. Rodrigo Mendoza, her father, was home. His black Mercedes was parked at the main entrance. Aurelia walked up the marble steps. The butler opened the door. "Senora Campello, what a pleasant surprise. Senor Mendoza is in his study." She went up to the second floor. Her father's study had always inspired awe in her. A huge room with dark oak paneling, leather chairs, and portraits of ancestors on the walls. Rodrigo sat behind a massive desk, looking over some documents. At the sight of his daughter, he stood up. "Aurelia? What's wrong?" She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a word. Only now, in her father's presence, did she begin to shake. "Sit down." He motioned her to a chair, poured brandy from a crystal decanter. "Drink." Aurelia took a sip. The alcohol burned her throat, but helped her come to her senses a little. "Ernesto." She took another sip. "I caught him with his mistress, in our bedroom." Rodrigo froze. His face, normally good-natured, turned rigid. "Are you sure?" Aurelia nodded. "I saw them, with my own eyes." "Scoundrel!" Father pounded his fist on the table in fury. "I always knew he wasn't worthy of you, an upstart who was lucky enough to marry my daughter." "Dad." "No, listen to me." He sat down across from me. "This marriage was a mistake from the beginning. I let you marry him because you were in love. But now—" "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Rodrigo pulled out his cell phone. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. We'll prepare the divorce papers. And believe me, that scoundrel won't get a dime. But half of our property is in his name." Dad grinned. "You forget whose daughter you are. My lawyers are the best in the country. Besides, we have proof of his adultery. We'll transfer everything to you, including his share of the apartment. He won't just give it all up." "He will," Rodrigo said stiffly. "When he finds out the alternative is total ruin. I could destroy his career with one phone call, and he knows it." Aurelia watched her father dial the lawyer's number. His confidence gave her strength. Yes, she is no longer the naive girl who once fell for pretty words and promises. She is Aurelia Mendoza, daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city. "Manuel, it's Rodrigo. Come to my place immediately and bring all the documents of my daughter's estate." While her father was on the phone, Aurelia pulled out her cell phone. 3 missed calls from Ernesto, so he'd already discovered she was home. I wonder what he's going to say. What lies would he come up with this time? "Don't answer him," her father said, noticing the look in her eyes. "Let him suffer. Manuel will be here in an hour. We'll talk it over." "What if—" she stammered. "What if he really loves her?" Rodrigo snorted. "Loves? He loves your money, your status. Do you think this wench showed up by accident? She must have found out all about your family, your status. A woman like that doesn't get involved with married men for no reason." There was logic in his words. Mariana had indeed asked about her, inquired about her family. Ernesto was more than just a lover to her. He was a ticket to high society, a chance to climb the social ladder. The phone vibrated again. A message from her husband. "We need to talk. It's not what you think." Aurelia grinned. Not what she thought? What was she supposed to think, catching him half naked with his mistress in their bedroom? "Dad," she raised her eyes to her father. "I want him to lose everything." Rodrigo nodded, satisfied. "That's my daughter. Don't worry, we'll arrange everything. It's your wedding anniversary in a month, right?" "Yes. We were going to have a celebration at a restaurant." "Great," Dad smiled. "We'll have a celebration, one that he'll remember for the rest of his life." A predatory gleam appeared in his eyes, the same one that intimidated his business associates. Aurelia knew that look. Her father was already plotting his revenge. Manuel Ferreira, the Mendoza family's chief lawyer, arrived 40 minutes later with a hefty briefcase full of documents. His assistant, a young woman with a keen eye, carried a laptop and several folders. "So," Manuel seated himself at the desk in Rodrigo's office, "am I understanding the situation correctly? Your husband is cheating on you with an employee of his company." Aurelia nodded. She had already had 2 cups of strong coffee that the housekeeper had brought, but her hands were still shaking. "We have proof." She pulled out her phone and showed the lawyer photos from the corporate party, checks from restaurants, and a history of bank transactions. Manuel scrutinized each document, making notes in his notebook. "It's very good that you've gathered all this. Is there anything more compromising?" "I saw them today, in our bedroom." "Any witnesses?" Aurelia shook her head. "No, I was alone." "That's all right," Rodrigo interjected. "The main thing is to deprive him of all his possessions. Is that possible?" Manuel opened one of the folders. "Let's see. The apartment is registered to both spouses in equal shares. The car is registered to Mr. Campello, but it was bought with money from the Mendoza family. The bank accounts—" "I want everything to go to Aurelia," Rodrigo said firmly. "Every last centavo." The lawyer tapped his pen on the table thoughtfully. "There are several options. First, it can be proven that most of the property was purchased with Mendoza family money. Second, the fact of adultery also plays into our hands. Third—" At that moment, Aurelia's phone rang again. "Ernesto." She dropped the call. "Is he trying to contact you?" Manuel asked. "Yes, but I'm not answering." "That's right. Don't communicate with him without an attorney present." Manuel's assistant was quickly typing something on a laptop. Rodrigo paced around the office, stopping at the window from time to time. "How quickly can we get the documents ready?" he asked. "The basic package will be ready in 2 days. But here's an idea." Manuel turned to Aurelia. "You spoke of a wedding anniversary. When exactly?" "In 3 weeks. We were planning to celebrate at the Olimpo restaurant." "Great. Here's what I suggest. We prepare all the divorce papers and property transfers, and you pretend nothing is going on. Let him think you don't know anything." Rodrigo paused. "And then what?" "And then," Manuel smiled, "we'll give him a surprise right at the party. Imagine, all the guests are gathered, the festive atmosphere, and then divorce papers. Public humiliation is the best revenge." Aurelia imagined the scene. All their friends, colleagues, relatives would witness his shame. "I like it," Rodrigo said. "But can Aurelia pretend for that long?" "I can," she answered firmly. "I want him to pay for everything." Manuel nodded. "Then let's get to work. We'll need all the real estate documents, bank statements, car purchase papers." They spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of the plan. Manuel's assistant made a list of the necessary documents. Rodrigo made a few calls to his business partners. He wanted to be sure that Ernesto would not be able to find a job in any serious company in the city. "What about this girl?" Manuel asked. "With the mistress?" "Mariana," Aurelia said her name with disgust. What about her? You can sue her for ruining a marriage. It's still practiced in some states. Rodrigo shook his head. No, she's not worth our efforts. Let her get what she deserves, a broke, penniless lover. By evening, the plan was ready. Manuel left to work on the documents, promising to keep them informed every step of the way. Aurelia glanced at her watch almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Her phone showed 15 missed calls from Ernesto and a dozen messages. Stay here tonight, her father suggested. Your room is always ready. She shook her head. No, I have to go home. Otherwise, he'll suspect something. Are you sure you can handle it? Yes, I'll play the part of the unsuspecting wife, getting ready for the anniversary, smiling, pretending everything's fine. Rodrigo hugged his daughter. You're strong, like your mother. She would be proud of you. Aurelia squeezed his hand. Her mother had died 5 years ago, not living to see their first wedding anniversary. She wondered what she would say now. On the way home, she thought through her line of behavior. She needed to be natural, not overplay it. Say she'd been at the salon late, her phone was dead. No accusations, no innuendo. Ernesto was waiting for her in the living room. He jumped up when she entered. Where have you been? I'm going crazy. In the parlor. She took off her shoes. My phone ran out of battery, sorry. She saw him relax, believed. Of course he'd like to believe that he hadn't been caught, that things could go on as before. What's wrong? She asked. Did something happen this afternoon? No, nothing, he smiled strainedly. It's just, I was worried. You weren't answering your cell phone. I'm sorry, honey. It won't happen again. She walked over and kissed his cheek like she always did. Her lips touched the skin where another woman's lips had been hours ago. I'm really tired, Aurelia said. I'm going to take a shower. In the bathroom, she stood under the hot jets for a long time, trying to wash the day off her. Then she wiped herself down, put on her silk pajamas, and went to bed. The same bed where Mariana had been today. Ernesto came in half an hour later. He lay down beside her but did not touch her. Aurelia could feel his tension. He still wasn't sure if she'd seen them or not. Good night, she said. Good night, he replied. Aurelia closed her eyes, but she didn't sleep. She thought about the documents Manuel was preparing, about the holiday that would turn into a nightmare for her husband, about how sweet revenge would be. Outside the window, the night city rumbled. The anniversary was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of pretenses and smiles and lies. And then she'd finally shed her mask. Preparing for the anniversary celebration had taken an incredible amount of effort on Aurelia's part. Every call to the restaurant, every conversation about the menu, every choice of decorations was difficult for her, but she smiled, discussed details with the organizer, and pretended that this was the most important event in her life. That morning she met with the florist at the Olimpo restaurant. The luxurious room with panoramic windows was to be the site of her triumph and its downfall. I think white roses will be perfect, the florist said as she arranged sample arrangements on the table. They symbolize purity and fidelity. Aurelia held back a bitter chuckle. Yes, of course, and add red ones for passion. Ernesto had tried to be the perfect husband these past few days. He came home on time, brought flowers, took interest in the holiday preparations. He was clearly afraid she suspected something and was trying to make amends. How about this? The florist showed a sketch of the centerpiece arrangement. Perfect, Aurelia replied mechanically, thinking about the documents Manuel was already preparing. After her meeting with the florist, she drove to the salon. This place was now her only refuge. Here she could at least briefly forget her husband's betrayal. Señora Campello, Maria greeted her with a concerned look. Señora Vasquez called. She wants to make an appointment for a coloring. Aurelia froze. Mariana Vasquez? Yes, she said your husband recommended her. What nerve. Not only is she sleeping with her husband, but she wants to come to her salon. Tell her we're busy for the month ahead, Aurelia replied coldly. In her office, she checked her mail. Manuel had sent the first draft of the divorce papers. Everything was prepared perfectly. Every account, every piece of real estate, every little thing was going to go to her. The phone vibrated. A message from Ernesto. Don't forget, tonight we're going to pick out a cake for the party. Aurelia looked at the screen in disgust. Not only did she have to tolerate his presence at home, but she had to spend time with him planning a celebration that would be his undoing. A friendly middle-aged woman greeted them at the pastry shop. Mr. and Mrs. Campello, how nice to see you. Let's see our best choices for our wedding anniversary. They sat down at a table and the parade of samples began. Each piece of cake seemed tasteless to Aurelia, but she dutifully tasted and gave her opinion. Honey, do you like this one? Ernesto placed his hand on her palm. She suppressed the urge to pull her hand away with an effort of will. Yes, very much. Then we'll take it. Just make it bigger. There are a lot of guests. Guests, all their friends, co-workers, relatives. Everyone would see his shame. After the pastry shop, they drove home. In the elevator, Ernesto put his arm around her waist. You're so beautiful today. Aurelia stiffened in his arms, smelling the same perfume that Mariana had smelled in their bedroom. Tired, she pulled away gently. It's been a long day. Back at the apartment, she went straight to the bathroom. Turned on the water harder so she wouldn't hear him walking around the house. I wonder if he's texting his mistress right now, telling her how he picked out the cake with his wife. In the evening, Ernesto suggested they watch a movie. They sat on the couch and he tried to hug her, but she found an excuse to pull away every time. Either she needed to check her phone or get a drink of water. Is something wrong? He finally asked. Nothing's wrong, she smiled, strained. Just a lot of thoughts about the holiday. Don't worry, it'll be perfect. Oh yes, it would indeed be a perfect holiday, just not the one he imagines it to be. The next morning his father called, How are you? Hanging in there, she spoke softly, locking herself in her parlor office. Manuel sent the papers. I've seen it. Is everything ready? Almost. Just need to iron out the details with the restaurant and… I'm not talking about the feast, Dad interrupted. Are you ready for what's coming? Aurelia was silent for a moment. Yes. More every day. He doesn't have a clue? No. Plays the part of a loving husband. Even tries too hard. Good. Keep me posted. After talking to her father, she checked her appointment schedule. Today was the day to choose musicians for the party. Ernesto had promised to come, but she wouldn't be surprised if he found an excuse to stay at work again. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a text came in. Sorry, honey. Important meeting with a client. Pick one yourself. I trust your taste. Aurelia opened her bank tracking app. There it was. Lunch at Maxime's restaurant for 2. Again with Marianne. The meeting with the musicians had gone quickly. She'd picked the first decent option. What did it matter what kind of music would be playing when she handed her husband the divorce papers? In the evening, she sat at the living room table for a long time, sorting through the guest lists. Each name raised a question. Who among them knew? Who is guessing? Who discusses her behind her back, pitying the naive wife who doesn't notice her husband's infidelity? Ernesto returned late, smelling of wine and other people's perfume. He went straight into the shower and she pretended to be completely absorbed in preparing for the party. How was the meeting with the musicians? He asked, coming out of the bathroom. Good. I picked a quartet, violin, cello, piano, and vocals. Great. He leaned over to kiss her cheek. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. That's okay, she smiled. The important thing is that you'll be at the celebration itself. Oh yes, he would definitely be at the celebration, and it would be an evening he would never forget. The anniversary day began as usual. Aurelia woke up early. Ernesto was still asleep. On the bedside table there was a velvet box. He had left it last night. Inside was a diamond necklace, the exact one she'd wanted months ago. He'd said it was too expensive then. Now she knew why he'd bought it. Guilt was the best motivator for generosity. She put the necklace back in the box without even trying it on. Soon it would be her property anyway, like everything else. "Happy anniversary, love." Ernesto hugged her from behind. "Did you like the present?" "Very much." She turned to him with a smile. "It's beautiful." "Will you try it on tonight at the party?" "Of course." She kissed him on the cheek and went into the bathroom. The mirror reflected a woman with flawless makeup and empty eyes. 6 years of marriage. Today, it would end. A team of stylists was waiting for her at the salon. She wanted to look perfect this evening. While she was being styled, a text message from Manuel came in. "The papers are ready. My assistant will deliver them to the restaurant by 7 p.m. "Senora Campello," the makeup artist showed her a palette of shadows. "What shade do you prefer?" "Do something dramatic," Aurelia replied. "Tonight's a special night." By 5 o'clock she was completely ready. Her dark blue dress emphasized her figure, her high hairdo exposed her neck, and her makeup was flawless. She took the necklace out of the box and clasped it. The diamonds glittered coldly in the light of the lamps. Ernesto picked her up at the salon. He was wearing the new suit she'd helped pick out a week ago. "You're gorgeous," he said, kissing her hand. "The necklace is perfect for you." They drove to the restaurant. On the way, Ernesto talked about the guests, about how fast these 6 years had flown by, about plans for the future. Aurelia stared silently out the window, counting the minutes until the denouement. The restaurant Olimpo shone with lights. The maitre d' met them at the entrance. "Welcome, Senor and Senora Campello. Everything is ready according to your wishes." The room was decorated exactly as she wanted. White and red roses, crystal vases, silk draperies. A string quartet was already tuning instruments. Candles and silver candlesticks flickered on the tables. Ernesto's parents were the first to arrive. His mother kissed Aurelia on both cheeks. "Darling, you are simply radiant. What a lovely necklace." Aurelia caught her mother-in-law's look of genuine admiration. "I wonder what she will say in a couple of hours when she finds out about her son's adventures." The guests arrived one after another. Ernesto's colleagues, family friends, business partners. Aurelia greeted them with a professional smile, accepted congratulations, showed her necklace to the admiring ladies. At 7 o'clock, her father arrived. Rodrigo Mendoza looked as impeccable as ever in his expensive suit. He kissed his daughter on the forehead. "You look beautiful, darling." His eyes asked, "Are you ready?" She gave a barely perceptible nod. Ernesto gave a welcoming speech, talked about love, about fidelity, about how lucky he was to have such a beautiful wife. Aurelia stood beside him, holding his hand, and smiled. "Here's to 6 years of happiness." Ernesto raised his glass. The guests applauded. The musicians played their first dance tune, the same one they had danced to at the wedding. "Shall we dance?" Ernesto held out his hand to her. They spun in a slow dance. His hand rested on her waist as it had 1,000 times before. But now every touch was disgusting. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About our wedding," she smiled. "About the time you put the ring on me and swore your eternal love." Something in her voice made him wary. "Aurelia?" "Hush," she pressed closer to him. "Our guests are watching." After the dance, dinner began. Waiters were serving exquisite dishes. Wine was flowing. Toasts and congratulations were heard. Aurelia sat at the head of the table next to her husband and counted the minutes. At 9 o'clock they brought the cake, a 3-tiered work of art decorated with fresh flowers. Ernesto picked up the knife. "Let's cut it together, like at a wedding?" Her hand lay on top of his hand on the handle of the knife. They cut the cake in sync and the guests applauded again. "Kiss!" shouted one of the guests. Ernesto leaned toward her. His lips were soft and warm as always, the same lips that had kissed Marianne in their bedroom. The clock struck 10. Manuel's assistant was about to show up with the paperwork. Aurelia excused herself and went out to the ladies' room. She needed a few moments of solitude before the final act. In the powder room, she fixed her makeup, checked her hair. The diamonds in her necklace sparkled under the bright lights, the last gift from an unfaithful husband. Her phone vibrated a message from Manuel's assistant. "I'm on site with the paperwork." Aurelia took a deep breath and exhaled. It was time. She walked out of the restroom and headed back into the hall where the last act of this drama awaited her. The musicians were playing something light and festive. The guests were dancing, laughing, enjoying the evening. None of them suspected what surprise awaited them. The celebration was in full swing when the music suddenly stopped. The doors of the restaurant opened and a woman in white appeared on the doorstep. Aurelia didn't immediately realize what was happening, but then she recognized the dress, her wedding dress, which was stored in a special pouch in the back of the closet. Marianne stood in the doorway, radiant and beautiful. The dress fit her perfectly, as if it had been made especially for her. Her long veil reached down to the floor and she held a bouquet of white flowers, just like the one Aurelia had worn at her wedding. There was dead silence in the hall. All the guests froze, not realizing what was happening. Ernesto turned pale. His hand holding the champagne glass was visibly trembling. "Now I am his real wife!" Mariana's voice was ringing with triumph. She took a few steps forward, her heels clacking on the marble floor. Aurelia rose slowly from the table. She looked not at Marianne but at her husband. His face reflected fear, shame, and confusion, all the emotions she had been waiting for. "What's going on here?" Ernesto's mother was the first to break the silence. "Who is this woman?" Mariana turned to the guests. "I'm the one Ernesto really loves. We've been together for months now, and he promised to divorce his wife for me." A whisper swept through the hall. Aurelia noticed some of the guests pull out their phones and start filming what was going on. This would be the main topic of town gossip tomorrow. "Ernesto," Rodrigo Mendoza's voice sounded like the blow of a whip. "Is it true?" Ernesto opened his mouth but could not utter a word. His gaze darted between his wife and his mistress, as if he couldn't decide who should be saved first. "Aurelia," he finally squeezed out, "I can explain everything." "Really?" Marianne laughed. "Explain, darling. Tell everyone how you came to see me every day, how you said you'd never loved your wife the way you loved me, how you promised we'd be together as soon as you found a way to get a divorce without losing her father's money." Every word she said hit exactly on target. Aurelia saw Ernesto cringe under the judgmental stares of the guests, the way his mother pressed her hand to her mouth and his father shook his head. "Where did you get that dress?" Aurelia asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Ernesto gave me the keys to your apartment," Mariana replied triumphantly. "Said I could take whatever I wanted because I would soon be mistress of the house anyway." Now the whispers in the hall grew louder. Ernesto's colleagues averted their eyes, not wanting to meet his gaze. The business partners were quietly conversing, shaking their heads. "You gave her the keys to our house?" Aurelia said it quietly, but in the ringing silence her voice was heard by all. "Yeah, it was—" Ernesto stammered, trying to find an excuse. "He didn't just give me the keys," Marianne went on the offensive. "He gave me jewelry, took me to the best restaurants, got me rooms in expensive hotels, all on your daddy's dime, of course." Rodrigo Mendoza stood up. "You used my family's money to support a mistress?" "No, Señor Mendoza, I—" "Don't lie," Mariana interrupted him. "No more lies. It's time for everyone to know the truth." She stepped closer to the table, her white dress rustling on the floor. "Do you know why I came here today?" Because I'm tired of being a secret, tired of hiding. Ernesto promised he would announce the divorce on the anniversary, but I see he lied again. Aurelia watched this performance with a strange calmness. Mariana was doing all the work herself, ruining Ernesto's reputation in front of the whole town. Honey, Ernesto's mother walked over to Aurelia. I'm so sorry. We didn't know. No one knew, Aurelia replied. He was good at pretending. Marianne continued to speak, reveling in the audience's attention. He said he never really loved you, that he only married for your family's money, that you were cold and calculating, thinking only of your salon. Shut up. Ernesto finally found his voice. Stop it. Why? Marianne turned to him. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that what you told me every time we were together? Aurelia took off her necklace, her husband's last gift, and placed it on the table. So all this time you've just been using me? No, Aurelia, I swear. He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. Don't touch me, her voice was icy. Don't ever touch me again. Marianne watched the scene with a triumphant smile. See, darling, you are free now. We can be together. Ernesto looked at her with horror. Have you gone mad? You've ruined everything. Me? You're the one who ruined everything when you started dating me while remaining a married man, when you made promises you had no intention of keeping. The guests began to leave the room. No one wanted to remain a witness to this shame. Only the closest friends and family remained in their seats, not knowing how to react to what was happening. Aurelia looked at her wedding dress, now worn by another woman. The dress that had symbolized the beginning of their life together was now a symbol of its end. The restaurant hall was almost empty. Only the closest people remained. Ernesto's parents, Aurelia's father, a few friends who didn't know whether to leave or stay. Mariana still stood in her wedding dress, but her triumphant smile was beginning to fade. She had clearly expected a different reaction from Ernesto. Aurelia, Ernesto stepped toward his wife, let me explain. What exactly do you want to explain? She turned to him. How you brought your mistress into our house, how you gave her the keys, how you let her wear my wedding dress. He turned even paler. I didn't give her the dress, I swear. I just gave her the keys to our apartment, Aurelia nodded. Yeah, I heard that. You know what the best part is? I knew about it, about everything. Now it was Marianne's turn to go pale. What? I saw you, Aurelia spoke calmly, almost indifferently. In our bedroom, on our bed, 3 weeks ago. Ernesto swayed as if he'd been struck. You knew? Of course I knew. I knew about every date you went on, every restaurant, every hotel, about the gifts you gave her with my money. She opened her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. Here, look at this. Bank statements, restaurant receipts, hotel bills. I've been collecting them for weeks. Ernesto took the papers with trembling hands. Why did you keep quiet? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, she turned to Marianne, and how far she would go. Marianne rubbed her veil nervously. He promised a divorce, said he only loved me. And you believed it? Aurelia smiled for the first time that evening. Believed a man who betrayed his own wife? Who let you come here in my wedding dress thinking it would be spectacular? Rodrigo Mendoza handed his daughter another folder of papers. It's time, dear. Aurelia nodded and pulled some sheets out of the folder. Do you know what these are, Ernesto? Divorce papers, already signed by my lawyers. And do you know what the best part is? According to these papers, all our property passes to me. What? He frantically began to read the papers. But that's impossible. Half the apartment is registered to me. Not anymore, Rodrigo intervened. My lawyers have worked on it. Given the evidence of your adultery and the fact that everything was bought with our family's money, you can't do that. Ernesto turned to Aurelia. This is our common home, our common life. Was shared. she corrected. Until the moment you brought her there. Marianne began to stagger toward the exit. I'd better go. Wait, Aurelia's voice stopped her. You wanted to be his wife? Wanted my house, my money, my life? Well, congratulations, you're going to get it. Just him, without everything else. Ernesto frantically flipped through pages of documents. Does it say here that I have to vacate the apartment within 3 days? Yes. And don't forget to get your mistress out of my wedding dress. Marianne twitched as if she'd been struck. I don't... Not what? Aurelia looked at her with contempt. You didn't know he was married? I did. Didn't realize you were destroying someone else's family. I did. You did it deliberately, expecting to get a rich husband, but you miscalculated. Ernesto's mother wept quietly in a corner, his father gloomily looking at his son. The friends who remained in the hall glanced around, clearly wishing they had left sooner. Sign it. Aurelia held out a pen to Ernesto. Now. And if I refuse? Then, Rodrigo interjected, I'll call your superiors and tell them how you've been spending company money on your love affairs. I'm sure they'll be interested in some of the transactions. Ernesto turned white. You're bluffing. Shall we check it out? Rodrigo pulled out his cell phone. I have the company president's number on speed dial. Ernesto's hand shook as he signed the documents. Mariana watched on in horror, realizing her plan had failed. Done. Aurelia took the signed papers. You are now free to go. You can go with your fiancée. Just have her return the dress. It's my property after all. Aurelia. Ernesto made one last attempt. We can fix this. I love you. No, she shook her head. You love my father's money. You love the comfortable life I've provided for you. Now let's see how much Marianne loves you when you have nothing left. She turned to the waiters. Bring the bill, please. Put it all on Mr. Campello's tab. But, Ernesto began. Don't worry, dear, she smiled. This is your last bill. Mariana finally couldn't stand it any longer and rushed toward the exit, tangling in her long dress. Ernesto stared after her, then shifted his gaze to his wife, now ex-wife. What am I to do? He asked, lost. That's not my problem anymore. Aurelia took off her wedding ring and placed it next to her necklace. You have 3 days to get your things out of the apartment. You'll leave the keys with the concierge. She turned to her father. Dad, will you take me home? Rodrigo nodded and offered his daughter his hand. They headed for the exit, leaving behind shattered dreams of a happy marriage and faithful love. At the door, Aurelia turned around one last time. Ernesto was still standing with the papers in his hands, confused and pathetic. His parents were quietly arguing about something in the corner. Waiters were clearing away untouched champagne glasses and plates of birthday cake. It was the end of her marriage, the end of illusions, the end of pretense. But it was also a beginning, the beginning of a new life, where she would no longer be the victim of someone else's betrayal.